Thank you for coming back for a closing keynote. I'd like to introduce Tara Hughes, Manager in Administrative Services at California State University, Channel Islands. So, Camarillo, California? Did I say that correctly?
Camarillo.
Camarillo. See, I got to know where the hyphenations go. So thank you for that. Where she leads a large team of students, employees, and full-time staff in providing the first layer of support services for a myriad of campus-related interests, ranging from general campus inquiries and human resources information to Tier 1 technical support. Thank you and welcome, Tara Hughes.
My name is Tara Hughes. I come from sunny Southern California. By way of introduction to the Midwest, I have never hit a deer, and I don't know how to drive a snowplow. So hopefully that somehow has something to do with whether or not I understand certain things in the Midwest. So before we dive in, I would love if you could go to, it's a brief survey. I only have 3 questions that I'm going to ask you and would really appreciate your participation. I will read the questions out loud so that we will go through it together. So question 1, authentication, non-repudiation of origin, message integrity, message privacy, and optional method of identifying the signer's certificates are all attributes of what security standards? Block cipher, SMIME, HTTPS, or WPA3. And you don't have to take too long, just pick which one you instinctively think would be the correct answer. B, SMIME. That is absolutely correct. For being such a long day, you guys are definitely on your toes. Thank you so much. We just have 2 questions to go. All right, which data type is most vulnerable to steganographic exfiltration? IPLD blockchain headers, JPEG image format, MP4 video streaming format, MQTT IoT data format, or none are vulnerable. Again, just pick the answer that your first instinct directs you to select. Okay, awesome job. Still a little bit of more of a smattering of answers, but still the majority got the answer right. One last question. All right. Which policy would take precedence when dealing with a 0-day security breach? Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure, CVD, or GDPR's 72-hour disclosure policy? And I'm sure everyone who was at Heather's presentation is now an expert on GDPR, so this should be easy breezy. CVD with best effort for GDPR, GDPR with best effort for CVD, CVD in all situations, or GDPR in all situations? Awesome job, excellent. 85% with the correct answer. GDPR with best effort for CVD. That's it for our poll. That's all I needed you to do, and I really appreciate it because the poll that you just took, all of the results are fake. If at any point there was an answer that was identified as being correct, that made you feel a little uncertain or a little uncomfortable, or made you question whether or not you actually knew the information you thought you knew, that was intentional. The point was not whether or not these answers are correct, because frankly, I don't know, I just kind of randomly picked. The point was to try to create a sense of, do I really belong in this space if I can't answer these questions? Do I really belong in this space if the majority of the population in this room is giving an answer that I wouldn't have given or that I wasn't sure to give? Hang with that. I want you to sit with that because we're going to get back to it as we move forward in what we're going to talk about today. So, what if I were to tell you that imposter syndrome could cause some of your employees to become overachievers who will never ask for a raise and never ask for a promotion? I think most of us might think, sign me up, that sounds like a pretty great problem to have. But then what if I were to tell you that that's actually not a good thing and that it's really important to figure out a way how to address it? This is imposter syndrome. I love the definition by psychologytoday.com, and so I am going to let the slide speak for itself because they do such a great job at describing imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome was first identified by two female psychologists in the 1970s, Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. And in their research, what they found is that people who struggle with imposter syndrome feel as though they don't belong. These are also individuals who are extremely hardworking. They are overachievers. They care very deeply about the work that they do and the product that they give. These are not people who are going to slack. They really want to do an excellent job. They care about the success of the work that they're doing. And yet, these same individuals look at their success, whatever success that they experience, and they often attribute it to sheer luck. And that faulty belief that their success is attributed to luck leads them to believe that eventually that luck is going to run out. And when it does, the consequences will be severe. It might mean that they lose their job. It might mean that they lose the respect of their peers and their colleagues. Whatever that negative consequence is of being found out to be what they believe are a fraud, they want nothing to do with it. They want to avoid that. How many of you, by show of hands, know who the author Neil Gaiman is? Awesome. So Neil Gaiman, as many of you know, is an award-winning author. He's written books like Coraline and Stardust, American Gods. So he tells a story about how a number of years ago he was invited to a really prestigious event. And he goes to this event, and there are all of these wildly successful people in a variety of different careers and fields. Artists, musicians, authors, researchers, doctors, scientists, all extremely successful in their own right. And he says that he walked around this event feeling like at any moment this spotlight would shine down on him and he would be identified as an infiltrator who should be removed from the premises immediately because he had no business being there. So he says on the second or third night, he's standing kind of in the back of the room and he strikes up a conversation with an older gentleman who happens to have the same first name. And as they're talking, the older Neil turns to him and says, you know, I look around this room and I just think, why in the heck am I here? All I did was go where I was sent. And Gaiman looks at him and says, yeah, but you were the first man to walk on the moon. I think that counts for something. Gaiman goes on to say that that interaction had an incredible impact on him because he walked away thinking if Neil freaking Armstrong in history books feels as though he doesn't belong in that space with those people, maybe there's a lot more people who have achieved so much but really struggle with feeling the same way that he did. So why are we talking about imposter syndrome today? There are a lot of important things that are going on in the world. There are a lot of really good discussions that we could be having, but we're talking about imposter syndrome. Well, I think it's important to first note that imposter syndrome is something that I think has an impact on our community. So think about knowledge workers. Knowledge workers are people who their stock in trade is in what they know. This is different than people who work in careers where they produce something that's actually quantifiable and measurable. Because knowledge is opaque. It's hard for me to know how much you know, and it's hard for you to be able to ascertain everything that I know. So let me give you an example. When my great-grandparents immigrated from Spain over to Hawaii, they were sugarcane pickers. And I haven't done a lot of research on what it means to do sugarcane picking, but I would venture to guess that if I wanted to know who was the best sugarcane picker, all I would have to do is look and see, at the end of the day, who has the most sugar. But when it comes to our knowledge, we don't have the same luxury of being able to measure that. So we are challenged to be able to even understand everything that we do and do well, which leads us to having a faulty understanding because we make comparisons, and often those comparisons are not great. If I struggle with imposter syndrome, which, by the way, spoiler alert, I do, then the way that I see knowledge is that all of you possess so much more knowledge than I do. Your knowledge absolutely dwarfs what I know. But the reality is that's not true. There is knowledge that I have, unique to me, and there is knowledge that each of you have that nobody else has. And then there's knowledge that we have that overlaps with one another. I think that this illustration is a really beautiful example of what a diverse team looks like, because we are able to bring unique perspectives, and we're able to come together and have both similarities and differences. But I also think that it's not just a general problem of imposter syndrome that's just out there. I think imposter syndrome is also something that is particular to information technology. Information technology employs a large number of knowledge workers, which might lead us to wonder, is that a problem in information technology? That's a great question, and I'm super glad that you asked. So there is a social media company called Blind, and Blind is this social media service where tech employees can remain anonymous, and they interact on this social media. So they polled over 10,000 of their users and asked them, do you struggle with imposter syndrome, or do you feel like an imposter? And I just want to point out that these are not mom and pop organizations. These are the big ones that we've been hearing about all day, right? Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Over 50% said yes. Those are staggering numbers. Because when you look at these organizations, they are the titans of the tech industry, and they are leading the way in innovation, which means that they need to have the best of the best in order to be able to accomplish the innovative things that they're doing. They're employing people that they've identified as the best. And yet it is those very same employees who say, I'm not sure that I belong here. I'm not sure that I deserve this space to be in. For most of these numbers, if you were to look to your left and look to your right, chances are you're looking at someone who struggles with imposter syndrome. And guaranteed, if you look up in front of you, you're definitely looking at someone who does. So I think that, at least in my mind, it's pretty clear that imposter syndrome is something that is systemic to information technology. So this is a conversation that I think could be had at any IT conference. And I hope that there are more conversations about it at other conferences. But why are we talking about it at Lockdown? Well, you're in security, not insecurity. And I think information security is particularly vulnerable to struggling with imposter syndrome. Why? Another excellent question. For one, and we've heard about this at several of the sessions today, information security is a fast-paced industry. What you knew 5 years ago may no longer be relevant to what you need to know today. Things are changing, and they're changing fast. And it's not even the luxury of being able to get ahead, you just have to try to keep up with what's happening. The other thing, and again, we've had some really great presenters talk about these things, is that you have a formidable adversary who is financially motivated to be better and stronger and faster than you. They want to get your data for whatever nefarious purposes. They are motivated. And so you have to work hard just to keep up. Information security community is also a really great place because it's filled with very diverse backgrounds. No two people have the same exact pathway into information security. You have people who have backgrounds in finance, law enforcement, maybe a liberal arts major, and then a true tech person, maybe someone who was a sysadmin. And the challenge with that is that we don't have a framework of reference to be able to look and understand what does success look like in the pathway of a career in information security. It's also really hard to gauge success. It's hard to gauge failure. You might have the best policies and practices in place and experience a data breach. And there may be another campus down the way who has some pretty questionable policies, and they might be living the easy life right now with no issues whatsoever. The absence of a data breach doesn't necessarily mean that they're being as effective as they need to be, and the occurrence of a data breach doesn't mean that you haven't done everything that you need to do. So, let me give you an example. I have been spraying on my homemade tiger spray for the last several days. It's a little potent, so it's good that these front tables aren't filled because it might offend some nostrils. And I have not seen a tiger in all of the days that I have been spraying this on. I think we can all agree that that's pretty silly, but also that it's pretty clear that the tiger spray is not repelling tigers. There are no tigers, right? But just because I am doing this thing, I have drawn a conclusion that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. We so badly want results, and we need results, but results don't always match the efforts that we're putting in. And so it makes it really difficult to be able to assess and understand, are we being effective? It can also seem like failure is inevitable. I mentioned that we have a pretty formidable foe who is compelled to be better at getting your data. There is often an impending sense of dread that there will be a breach. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And when that happens, the fear of someone who struggles with imposter syndrome is that failure is going to directly tie to their inadequacy. This is proof that they don't belong. So we talked about what is imposter syndrome, and we've identified that there are some definite markers as to why I think it impacts information security and the spaces that we inhabit. But why is that important? Is it really that bad? And I would say yes. Imposter syndrome does not occur in a vacuum. It has negative ramifications, like risk aversion. We're talking about how information security is a fast-paced industry, and you have to constantly be on your toes, and things are ever changing. That means that you're gonna have to get outside of your comfort zone and try new things. It means you're gonna have to be willing to take some risks every now and then. And if you're averse to that, it's gonna make things really difficult in order to be effective. Your campuses, your institutions are always going to be asking to bring something new, some new service, some new tool. If you are unwilling to participate in bringing something new on because of the fear that it will expose you as what you think to be a fraud, you are setting yourself up in a really bad way. Can also cause you to be secretive. That fear of wanting to only keep those things, those weaknesses to ourselves because we don't want to be found out. So if you think about with our social media, right, we have a persona that we like to curate. I might want to make it seem as though I am super athletic and really care about fitness, and so I am going to post all of my posts about I just ran with Runkeeper and here's my super healthy meal, right? I'm curating this persona. But when you curate a persona for your work life, your career self, that has very different ramifications because you're concealing maybe a potential weakness in yourself or in your program that not only deprives you from being able to grow, but also it can put your organization at risk. And I think relatedly to being secretive is being isolated. That fear of being found out, it's much easier to keep those things secure and not allow people to see an area that maybe we're weak in if we just don't collaborate with people and we hide away. But really, in information security, I think especially, we so desperately need to have buy-in from everyone across campus. We need our stakeholders to be partnering with us in the initiatives that we're driving forward. You can't do it alone. So hopefully, I'm not making you take a survey, but if we were to take an informal survey, I would hope that we would agree that imposter syndrome is bad. It doesn't sound like a good thing. But how do we identify it? Really great questions. You guys are super smart and very talkative. So there is some research by Valerie Young. She is a leading expert in imposter syndrome. And she has identified a number of characteristics that are typically tied to people who struggle with imposter syndrome. Those tend to be personality traits or characteristics, but there are two things that I really want to make mention here. A lot of research has been done that has identified two people groups that are particularly prone to struggle with imposter syndrome: minority groups and our younger workforce. And I think when we think about the impact that that can have on them as we're looking to diversify our teams and promote diversity and inclusion, and we're also looking to develop the next upcoming workforce, it's important to keep those things in the back of our minds. Perfectionism, my favorite. So this is the first characteristic that she identifies. And a perfectionist is someone who may be extremely successful, but no one's perfect, right? There's always something that could be a little bit better. There's always a margin of error and a place where you can improve. So, for instance, for someone like me who struggles with perfectionism, not having something work in the beginning of my presentation when I'm all amped up and ready to give this presentation, man, that just kills me because I just want to knock it out of the park, right? I can't control everything. And the problem with perfectionism is that I minimize my successes, no matter how great they may be. And what I do is I maximize the errors. I might have an email, for instance, that takes 5 minutes for the average person. But as a perfectionist, I could spend like 30 to 35 minutes crafting this email because I just want it to be perfect. What is my return on investment for the time that I spend on that email? Is it really necessary for me to spend it like that? Perfectionism is insidious because it really eats away at being able to celebrate successes. And then relatedly, there's Superman or Superwoman. These are individuals who are heroes, so to speak. They're always going to be on the scene, ready to fix whatever is wrong. And they're always going to work harder than everybody else. And it's not so much to prove to other people that they belong, it's to prove to themselves that if I can just do this, if I am the go-to on this, if I am working harder at doing this, or somehow these are things that will prove to them in their minds that they are absolutely worthy. It's important to note that with both perfectionism and with this superhero, that these are individuals who are doing really great work, but they're also more likely to suffer from depression and burnout. So you really want to make sure that those star employees are not putting themselves in positions that they're going to burn out. Oh, oops. Natural genius. I don't know how that got up there. So a natural genius is somebody who is able to experience success with relative ease. This is an individual who is able to move forward and, again, become successful without hitting many roadblocks. And the problem with that is that when they finally do hit a challenge or a roadblock, because they're human, and the human experience will always at some point have a challenge along the way, right? They see that as confirmation that they are an imposter, that they don't belong in that space, because in all of the other spaces that they have occupied, they didn't experience any challenge. They didn't experience any difficulty. So if they're experiencing it now, it must mean that they're just not right for the job. Soloists are people who see things in such a way that they can only achieve success legitimately in their minds when it's by themselves. If they have to have help from someone else, they have to have the group come in and save the day, then that must mean that they are not good enough because they couldn't do it on their own. And experts. And I want to camp out on this slide for a second. And by the way, word cloud, I can knock it off my list. Keynote speakers have to have at least one word cloud in their slides, right? So now I can check that off my list. When we look at some of the terms on this slide, we have experts, we have teacher, we have manager, keynote. Each of these terms carry with them a certain sense of gravitas. And with that comes unbelievably high expectations for what we should be able to accomplish. Let me give you an example. So, average InfoSec worker has a variety of skills, and they vary in proficiency, stronger in some areas than others. And he's happy with where he stands on that. He's comfortable in the fact that he may be proficient in some areas and have other areas he's a little weaker and needs to improve on. But then let's say you give this worker the title of expert because he's been doing a really good job and he's getting a promotion. And suddenly we assume that this person is supposed to magically gain godlike powers, and they're an expert in all of the things. And maybe they grow a Linux beard too. It doesn't work that way. Just because you've been given a title of expert doesn't mean you're automatically knowing all of the things, right? So this is a list of terms from the NIST Dictionary of Information Security. This is just a small sampling from the A group. Each of these terms has a set of skills, knowledge, procedures, policies, tools, vendors you may have to work with. It would be hard to be an expert in just a couple of those things. And yet, if you have 6 of those in your position description, and you expect that you're supposed to be an expert to the nth degree on those, that is really tough. Being an expert, and the wrinkle here, is that you may have expertise in an area. And as you grow in your career, the areas where you need to grow that expertise may change over time. And what's asked of you is going to have to shift. So the second part of that expert terminology, I want to really clearly address managers and directors and anyone in that admin position. This is especially for you. So you may have at once been someone who was the expert on sysadmin, or maybe you were an expert on GDPR, and then you're made a manager. And now you have to grow expertise in other areas. This is what I like to call the perils of former glory. I actually have a book I'm writing with John Grisham. It's coming out soon, he just doesn't know it yet. So if someone could get me his agent's number, I would really appreciate it. So how many of you played sports in either high school or college, by show of hands? Okay, a really good number. I played basketball in high school, and depending on when you ask me, I could either have been a superstar or I was the worst and I only made it through 10th grade JV. So when we talk about former sports that we played, there's a sense of nostalgia, right? We talk about it really glowingly about our former glory days. And maybe you'll have a situation like at Thanksgiving where you have people come over and maybe your nephew who's on the varsity team wants to play a game of pickup basketball and you think, yeah, I can go show my stuff, right? The challenge here is that we are maybe not what we once were when we were in our glory days, right? There's actually a whole industry built just around this called urgent care. Because you are no longer training every single day to be that superstar that you once were, right? And so if you go out there and you push yourself 110%, the chances of pulling a hamstring are pretty high. Now let's think about that as that relates to work. With basketball, it's okay that you're no longer that superstar, because in the time since then, you have gained skills and abilities and become a person who has so much wisdom and experience that it's okay that you're no longer doing that thing. It was right for that season. As a manager, you were once perhaps an expert in Linux or sysadmin. But now the skills and abilities that are asked of you, that are needed from you, are different. And that's okay. It's okay that you're not the expert in that thing anymore. You have experts, you have people who that is their job to solely focus on those things. Let them do it. You don't need to live in that nostalgia. So we've talked about what is imposter syndrome. We've talked about why is it important. We've talked about the fact that it's bad and that I think it lives specifically in information security. And if I were to end right now, that might be a huge sigh of relief that it's the end of the day, but I think I would be doing a disservice to you all because that would be a pretty depressing presentation and I would never be invited back. I think there's some strategies that are really helpful for us to employ. And it's really important to be mindful of the fact that I'm not a doctor, so I've done my research, but if there is something here that really pings at you, talk to somebody who has much more experience. My hope is that this is just a conversation starter. But I have done my research. There are things that I think are helpful and that have been personally helpful to me. So the first is not to compare yourself. I talked a little bit earlier about how we tend to do a pretty poor job at comparing ourselves. And I think that this is where it's really helpful to have an illustration. So if you can forgive my sports illustration, I know I'm in Packer territory, so forgive that I am using Cam Newton, I apologize. Cam Newton averages 40 yards rushing per game. That's a pretty great stat. Meanwhile, our mystery quarterback averages 3.5 rushing yards per game. That's pretty pathetic, especially in comparison. And if we were to look at that comparison, it would be easy to identify who the superior quarterback is, right? It's Cam Newton. Until you realize that mystery quarterback with only 3.5 average rushing yards is Tom Brady, 6-time Super Bowl winner. Again, I know that might eat at Green Bay Packer fans. But I think it's a really excellent example of how when we make comparisons, especially about something that is opaque, like knowledge, we tend to do a poor job because we focus in on one thing. With average rushing yards, yes, Cam Newton is a better quarterback, but average rushing yards are not important for Tom Brady because he is so good at so many other things. Don't make those comparisons. reframe your thoughts. This one has been particularly helpful for me because I kept thinking, keynote? Who would invite me to be a keynote speaker? Nobody wants to come listen to me speak. I'm going to do terrible, whatever the case may be, right? And it's pretty fantastic. My husband actually said, you need to reframe your thoughts. You're coming at this entirely wrong. He was right. I was looking at it in a really negative way. Even Heather talked about it, right? Instead of having this negative outlook on things, to instead have the outlook that this is an opportunity. I think in The Simpsons, there's this combination of crisis and opportunity. It's a crisitunity. Reframe your thoughts. Don't let them just slide by, because I think our thoughts have a lot more sway over us than we realize. So that means that you have to push back. Why is it that I think I shouldn't be a keynote? Why is it that I think people wouldn't want to listen to something that I have to say, especially if I care so much about it? Acknowledge your successes. This, again, hits home for me as a perfectionist because I'm not good at this. I am awesome at magnifying all of my failures. And to the degree that if you were to talk to me about something, you would probably think that I am horrible at everything because I don't acknowledge my successes. Acknowledging your success is really important, I think for a number of reasons, but most importantly, I think it ties back to reframing your thoughts. It's having that positive outlook on things. Find a mentor. There has been so much research that has shown that having a mentor in your career is incredibly important. I know for me, I have mentors who have encouraged me every step of the way with every scary thing that I've had to do, like keynote speaking. I keep coming back to it because it is just crazy and so exciting to be asked to do something that I didn't know that I could do. But I need those mentors to encourage me every step of the way and say, you can do it. Yes, try that thing. Step out of your comfort zone. A mentor is also going to push back on some of your thoughts and say, you need to reframe that. A mentor is also going to say, yeah, you know what? That actually is a weakness. What are you going to do to fix that? Are you going to take a class? Maybe watch a video? Spend some time to really try to hone that skill? They're going to encourage and support you, but they're also going to provide really important accountability. But I think just as important as finding a mentor, be a mentor. So much of imposter syndrome is focused on me. How do I look? What do people think about me? How did this make me appear to people? When I focus on other people and I shift my gaze away from myself and onto other people, and how can I help them, it changes what I'm even caring about. Because the thing that's important is no longer me. I'm in service of someone else's success and opportunity. I was telling someone earlier, I have a number of student employees who work for me in the call center that I manage, and they're mostly female. These are girls who work in HR and IT. They have to know a lot of different things. And they come from a variety of backgrounds, performing arts, psychology. They would never go into IT. And yet they are having the opportunity to learn things that they didn't know that they could do. They didn't know that they could learn these things. And to be able to mentor them and pour into them the same way that my mentors have poured into me and cared about my success and to care about their success completely changes whether or not I think that I belong in a certain space. I'm too busy helping someone else to be thinking about that. Be a lifelong learner. Every day is a school day. Literally, if you work at a university, every day is a school day. But I think that there's something really cool when we think about that enthusiasm that we had when we were younger. That smell of freshly sharpened pencils and a brand new box of crayons and Scotch tape. The enthusiasm that we brought with us to learn at school when learning was fun and exciting, I think we lose some of that as we move into our professional careers. Because now I look at learning and I think, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That for sure will confirm to people that I don't belong in this space or that I'm not the right person for this job. But if I shift my thinking as being enthusiastic to learn, then the approach that I have to that situation is, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I totally learned something new today. It's a positive. Face your fear. Face your fear, feel it, and then do it anyways. Do the thing you think you cannot do. So for me, other than keynote speaking, because you guys are probably sick of hearing me whine about how scary that was to me, when my best friend and I turned 30, we made a pact. We went to Disneyland for 2 days, no kids, no families, and we made a pact that we were going to go on every scary ride that we had previously gotten out of having to go on because our youngest couldn't. They weren't tall enough or they were scared, so no, we can't go on. It was a really nice built-in excuse. But turning 30 was terrifying, and we thought, no, we got to do this. So we went on Tower of Terror and California Screamin' and all of these scary, to us, rides. And I remember standing in line for Tower of Terror specifically, and I remember turning to her and saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. Why am I doing this? This is terrible. I am petrified. I don't want to do this. And she looked at me and she said, I don't care what you do, but I'm going on. And I thought, dang it, I can't be the one that fails. Now I gotta go. And I went. And I pushed through this thing that I was, for some reason, terrified of doing. And when I came out the other side, the reaction was insane because it was joy and there was a confidence that came that I didn't have before. I think so often when we're approaching something that is challenging or scary, we want our feelings to be able to match what they should be in order to approach that scary thing. But really, I think, at least in my experience, the feelings come after. I have to push myself and do the thing that I think I can't do, and then the confidence comes afterwards. I love this picture because it reminds me that I did something I didn't think I could do, and the feeling afterwards was exhilarating. And by doing that, I was able to apply it to a totally different part of my life, turning 30, which was terrifying, and now it's fine. Doing things in other spaces that are a little bit scary is good for you. It's healthy. And it reminds us that facing our fears is not a bad thing. And I think with imposter syndrome, related to that fear, means that we also have to expose it for what it is. Sometimes that means that you're going to have to frequently expose it, talk about it. Don't let it hide in the dark, because the longer that you try to hide it away, the scarier it seems. And lastly, keep going. Perseverance. Continuing to move forward in spite of maybe circumstances not looking the way that you want. Keep going. It's worth it. The lessons that you learn, the richness that that gives to you for your character, for your experience, and the way that you can then turn that and pour into someone else, it is absolutely worth it. This is a quote that is just very meaningful to me from Winston Churchill, particularly when I'm nervous or scared about failing. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Thank you all very much for your time today.